The sun had barely risen over the sleek, metallic skyline of Nova Station when Matthew Reed bolted from his bunk, heart pounding as he realized the time. His holocom beeped frantically, reminding him that he was running out of time to catch his shuttle. His final semester at Mars University had been a blur, and today, of all days, he couldn't afford to be late. If he missed his shuttle, he'd be stranded on the station for days. Grabbing his backpack, Matthew dashed through the narrow corridors of the student quarters, dodging alien species as they prepared for their morning routines. Nova Station, orbiting Mars, was a melting pot of interstellar students, diplomats, and traders, and Matthew had learned to maneuver through the throngs of strange beings with skill. However, today, his usual grace failed him. He bumped into a tall, four-armed alien who growled at him in irritation. "Sorry," Matthew called over his shoulder, not slowing his pace. As he neared the spaceport, the sleek, silver shuttle he was supposed to board came into view. The engines were already humming, and the ground crew was preparing for liftoff. He was so close, but time was slipping away. "Wait, hold the door," Matthew shouted, waving his arms as he ran toward the airlock. The ground crew member, a grizzled alien with 6 eyes, gave him a withering look, but held the door open long enough for Matthew to dive in, gasping for air as the door sealed behind him. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" a voice drawled. Matthew glanced up, still catching his breath, and found himself face to face with a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. She was lounging in her seat, staring at him over the edge of her datapad with amusement in her silver eyes. "Yeah, you could say that," Matthew panted, straightening his clothes and looking around for an empty seat. The shuttle was filled with passengers, a wide variety of species from all over the galaxy. Some had sleek, metallic skin, others radiated with a soft glow, and a few were so alien to Matthew that he couldn't begin to guess their origins. Among the sea of strange forms, an empty seat caught his eye near the back of the shuttle. He weaved his way through the aisle, his backpack bouncing against his shoulder, until he reached the vacant seat. As he approached, he noticed his seatmate was an alien with vibrant green skin, her eyes closed as if in deep sleep. Her features were humanoid, with a slender build and delicate, elongated fingers that rested lightly on her lap. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Matthew asked, his voice low as he stood awkwardly in the aisle. The alien's golden eyes snapped open, locking onto his with a piercing gaze. For a moment, she studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she gestured for him to sit. "Thanks," Matthew said, sliding into the seat and stowing his backpack beneath the chair. He extended a hand, attempting to be friendly. "I'm Matthew." The alien hesitated for a moment, then took his hand with a surprisingly firm grip. Her skin was smooth and warm to the touch. "Thea," she said, her voice soft but resonant, with an almost musical quality to it. "Nice to meet you, Thea. Heading back to Earth?" Thea's lips twitched into a small smile. "Not quite. I'm bound for the Intergalactic Academy." Matthew blinked, unfamiliar with the name. "The Intergalactic Academy. I've never heard of it. What do they teach there?" Thea's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "Oh, all sorts of things. Galactic diplomacy, advanced sciences, and other unique subjects." Before Matthew could probe further, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their departure. The engines roared to life beneath their feet, causing the shuttle to vibrate slightly as it prepared for takeoff. Matthew gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning white. He had never been a fan of space travel, especially during takeoff. Thea noticed his discomfort. "First time off-world?" she asked, a teasing note in her voice. Matthew shook his head, managing a weak smile. "No, but I still haven't gotten used to takeoffs, or landings, or space in general." Thea chuckled, a soft, bell-like sound that seemed to ease Matthew's tension. "Perhaps you're in the wrong line of work, then, Matthew of Earth." "I'm not exactly in space by choice," he replied, shifting in his seat as the shuttle lurched upward, pressing him into his chair. "I was an exchange student at Mars University. It was an amazing experience, But I can't wait to get back home. The shuttle continued to ascend, the hum of the engines growing louder. Matthew closed his eyes, willing himself to stay calm as the familiar nausea of takeoff washed over him. Then, unexpectedly, he felt a warm hand cover his own. "Breathe," Thea murmured, her voice steady and soothing. "Focus on your breath, in and out." Matthew opened one eye and found her golden gaze fixed on him, her expression calm and encouraging. Slowly, he followed her instructions, taking deep breaths and trying to focus on her voice, rather than the overwhelming sensation of being hurled into the void of space. By the time the shuttle broke free of Mars' atmosphere, Matthew realized that his breathing had returned to normal, and the nausea had subsided. He also realized that he was still holding Thea's hand. "Ah, thanks," he muttered, pulling his hand away and rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "I'm usually not this much of a mess." "No need to apologize," Thea said, her tone light. "We all have our moments of weakness. Some of us just hide it better than others." Matthew chuckled, grateful for her understanding. As the shuttle settled into its cruise through space, the tension slowly began to fade, and the two of them fell into an easy conversation. Thea was an engaging conversationalist, effortlessly switching between topics. She had an almost encyclopedic knowledge of galactic cultures and customs, and Matthew found himself hanging on her every word. She spoke of distant worlds he had never heard of, describing their unique ecosystems and the rich histories of their inhabitants. Hours passed in a blur as they shared stories about their respective worlds. Thea listened intently as Matthew recounted tales from Earth, her golden eyes wide with fascination when he described the diverse landscapes and the complexities of human society. "So, you're telling me," Thea said, her voice laced with disbelief, "that humans willingly climb mountains in freezing temperatures, risking their lives, just to reach the top?" Matthew laughed. "Yeah, it's called mountaineering. It's a challenge, a way to test your limits and prove to yourself that you can do the impossible." Thea shook her head, her expression a mixture of awe and amusement. Humans are truly something else. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a jolt that shook the entire shuttle. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the ship shuddered violently. Matthew's heart leaped into his throat. "What's happening?" he shouted, looking around in panic. Thea's brow furrowed as she tapped a small console embedded in her armrest. Her eyes darted across the screen, and her expression grew grim. "It looks like we've been caught in a tractor beam. We're being pulled off course." Before Matthew could fully process her words, a shimmering portal appeared in the middle of the aisle, and a towering figure stepped through. The beam was easily 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shimmered in the low light of the shuttle. Its eyes, black and unblinking, scanned the passengers with an eerie calm. "Greetings, travelers," the being's voice echoed in their minds, rather than their ears. "I apologize for the abrupt detour, but your presence is required at the Intergalactic Academy." A murmur of confusion and fear rippled through the shuttle, passengers exchanging bewildered glances. Matthew's pulse quickened, his earlier anxiety returning in full force. Thea, however, remained calm, her eyes locked on the towering figure. She stood gracefully and extended her hand toward Matthew. "It seems your adventure is only beginning, Matthew of Earth. Shall we?" Matthew stared at her outstretched hand, his mind racing. He had planned on going home, back to the comfort and familiarity of Earth, but something about Thea's confidence, the mysterious allure of this academy, and the sudden, extraordinary turn of events made him hesitate. With one final glance at the shuttle, Matthew took Thea's hand, feeling a strange mixture of dread and excitement as she led him toward the shimmering portal. Stepping through the shimmering portal was like walking into another universe. The disorienting sensation of passing through the energy field was brief, but as Matthew emerged on the other side, he was immediately overwhelmed by the vast, alien landscape that stretched out before him. He stood on a massive platform suspended high above the ground, the sky above awash in swirling hues of violet and gold, with stars twinkling far too close for comfort. The air felt different here, crisp and charged with an odd energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Around him, the other passengers from the shuttle began to materialize one by one, each looking just as bewildered as Matthew felt. In the center of the platform, the tall, iridescent alien who had brought them here stood waiting, its black eyes fixed on the group with an eerie calm. "Welcome to the Intergalactic Academy," the being's voice echoed in their minds once again, the soundless communication both unsettling and oddly soothing at the same time. "You have been chosen to witness and participate in the grand experiment. Consider yourselves honored." Matthew glanced at Thea, who stood beside him, her expression unreadable as she took in their new surroundings. He could feel the tension in his chest growing. What kind of experiment were they talking about? And why had they been chosen? As if sensing his thoughts, Thea turned to him and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Matthew. The Academy is a place of knowledge and discovery. We are safe here." Matthew nodded, though the pit in his stomach remained. Safe or not, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been pulled into something far bigger than himself. "Follow me," the tall alien instructed, turning to lead the group across the platform. Its long, graceful strides seemed effortless, while the rest of the passengers hurried to keep up. As they walked, Matthew finally had a chance to take in the full scope of the Academy. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a sprawling complex of gleaming towers and floating structures, connected by translucent bridges that shimmered with energy. The architecture was a blend of styles from across the galaxy, with towering spires that defied the laws of physics and hovering platforms that seemed to hang in midair without any visible support. The platform they walked on extended toward a vast central structure, a colossal building that pulsed with light at its core. The closer they got, the more Matthew could feel the strange energy intensifying, as though the very air around them was alive with power. "This place is incredible," Matthew muttered under his breath, his eyes wide with awe. Thea nodded, her gaze fixed on the central structure. "It's said that the Academy was built by the ancients, a race of beings who mastered technology and knowledge beyond anything we can comprehend. They disappeared millennia ago, but their legacy lives on here." "Ancients," Matthew echoed, the words sending a shiver down his spine. He had heard rumors of such beings, immortal entities who had once ruled the galaxy before vanishing without a trace. But those were just stories, weren't they? Before he could ask more, the group reached the entrance to the central structure. The tall alien raised one of its clawed hands, and the massive doors before them slid open with a low, resonant hum. Inside, the air was even more charged, and the energy Matthew had felt outside now seemed to pulse through his very veins. The chamber they entered was enormous, with walls of shimmering glass that offered a breathtaking view of the stars and nebulae beyond. In the center of the room stood a large, circular table, around which several figures were already seated. These figures were unlike any Matthew had ever seen, ancient, wise, and powerful. Their forms seemed to shift and shimmer, as though they were not entirely bound by the physical laws of reality. Some had elongated limbs, others had crystalline skin, and one appeared to be made entirely of light. "The Council of the Academy," Thea whispered to him, her voice tinged with reverence. "They oversee the experiments and guide the students." Matthew swallowed hard, suddenly feeling very small and out of place in the presence of such beings. The tall alien who had led them here stepped forward and bowed to the council. "Esteemed council," it said, its voice resonating through their minds once again, "I bring the latest arrivals to the Academy, chosen from across the galaxy to participate in the grand experiment." One of the council members, a being with flowing, silver hair and eyes like molten gold, turned its gaze toward the group. "Welcome," it said, its voice resonating with power. "You have been selected not by chance, but by destiny. Each of you possesses unique qualities that will contribute to the advancement of knowledge within the Academy." Matthew felt a chill run down his spine. Destiny? What unique qualities could he possibly have? He was just a student from Earth, with no special abilities or talents that could compare to the otherworldly beings standing around him. As if sensing his doubt, the silver-haired council member's gaze fell directly on him. "You, human, may feel out of place here, But know that your kind has always possessed a hidden strength, a resilience that has surprised the galaxy time and time again. It is for that reason you have been brought here. Matthew's breath caught in his throat. Resilience? Strength? He had never considered himself particularly strong or resilient, but something about the way the council members spoke made him feel as though they knew more about him than he did himself. Thea stepped forward, bowing her head respectfully to the council. "I am honored to be here, as are we all," she said, her voice steady and confident. "But may I ask, what exactly is this grand experiment?" The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the silver-haired being spoke again. "The grand experiment is a test of potential, both individual and collective. You will face challenges that will push you to your limits, forcing you to grow and evolve in ways you never imagined. Only those who succeed will gain the knowledge and power that the Academy offers." A murmur of unease rippled through the group. The word test had a foreboding ring to it, and Matthew could sense the apprehension in the air. "What kind of challenges?" someone in the group asked nervously. The council members' molten gold eyes glittered. "You will face trials that reflect the greatest strengths and weaknesses of your species. For humans, your trial will test your ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds." Matthew's mind raced. Overwhelming odds? What could they possibly have in store for him? The idea of being tested in such a way was both terrifying and exhilarating. He had come here expecting a simple shuttle ride home, and now he was being thrust into a galactic experiment that could determine his future. "You will not face these challenges alone," the silver-haired council member continued. "You will work together with your fellow participants, combining your strengths to overcome what lies ahead. Only through cooperation and understanding will you succeed." Thea glanced at Matthew, her expression serious. "It seems our paths are intertwined, Matthew of Earth. Are you ready for this?" Matthew let out a shaky breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what to expect, but there was no turning back now. He had been chosen, whether by destiny or by chance, and he would have to see this through. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The silver-haired council member smiled, a mysterious and knowing smile that sent another shiver down Matthew's spine. "Then let the grand experiment begin." With those words, the energy in the chamber shifted. The walls seemed to blur and dissolve, replaced by a vast, open landscape, a simulation, perhaps, but one that felt all too real. The air was thick with tension, and Matthew could feel the weight of the trial ahead pressing down on him. Thea stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Stay close, Matthew," she said, her voice low but steady. "We're in this together." Matthew nodded, his pulse racing as the reality of the situation sank in. This was no ordinary test. This was a trial of survival, a challenge that would push him beyond his limits. And if he was going to make it through, he would need every ounce of the resilience that the council believed he possessed. As the landscape around them solidified and the first challenge loomed on the horizon, Matthew took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. There was no going back now. The grand experiment had begun. Matthew's heart pounded in his chest as the landscape around him fully solidified. The simulated world stretched out before him, vast and alien, with towering mountains that gleamed like polished metal and rivers that shimmered like liquid light. Strange, bioluminescent flora dotted the terrain, their soft glow casting an eerie light over the scene. The Council of the Academy had spoken. The grand experiment had begun. Beside him, Thea stood silently, her posture tense but composed. Her violet skin seemed to glimmer in the unnatural light of this new world, and her golden eyes scanned the horizon with a practiced calm. Matthew envied her poise. Despite the confidence he had tried to muster earlier, his nerves were frayed. This was no ordinary test. It felt like a life-or-death challenge. "What do you think we're supposed to do?" Matthew asked, his voice betraying his anxiety. Thea turned her gaze to him, her eyes softening just a little. "We need to understand the trial first. These simulations are designed to test us in ways that reflect our species' strengths and weaknesses. For humans, That means we'll likely face challenges related to problem solving, adaptation, and survival. Great, Matthew muttered under his breath, trying to focus on anything other than the mounting tension. He wasn't sure how much resilience he had left in him. As they stood there, the other participants who had been brought to the academy began to gather around, their expressions a mix of fear, curiosity, and determination. There were at least a dozen beings, each from different worlds, each as strange and unique as the next. Some towered over Matthew and Thea, with skin made of stone or metal, while others were delicate, with translucent wings or glowing eyes. One of the alien beings, a massive creature with dark, obsidian-like skin and 4 muscular arms, stepped forward. "We need to assess our surroundings," it rumbled, its deep voice vibrating in the air. "The trial will reveal itself soon enough. We must be prepared." Thea nodded in agreement. "We should stick together. If the council expects us to cooperate, then working as a group is our best chance of survival." Matthew didn't argue. The prospect of facing whatever challenges lay ahead alone was far too terrifying. He watched as the group formed a rough circle, each being sizing up the others, mentally preparing themselves for the unknown. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Matthew's eyes widened as cracks began to form in the earth, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed from below. The air grew thick with tension as the simulated world shifted around them, the environment transforming before their very eyes. From the cracked earth, towering structures began to rise, gleaming spires of metal and glass, their sharp angles jetting into the sky like the teeth of some gargantuan beast. The once open landscape was quickly becoming a labyrinth of towering mechanical obstacles. "What the hell is happening?" Matthew shouted over the noise, his heart racing as the ground continued to shake. Thea grabbed his arm, her eyes sharp with focus. "It's the trial. It's beginning." Within moments, the landscape had transformed into a maze of towering, shifting walls and narrow corridors, the paths winding and twisting with no clear direction. The maze extended far into the horizon, its end nowhere in sight. The obsidian-skinned creature from earlier growled, frustration evident in its voice. "We must find the exit. Quickly. This place is not meant to be navigated passively." "Agreed," Thea said, her voice firm. "But we can't just rush in blindly. This is a test, not just of physical endurance, but of intelligence and strategy. If we're going to find the way out, we need to be smart about it." Matthew nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "So how do we do that?" Thea studied the maze for a moment before speaking. "The council wants to test our ability to work together. We'll need to split up, cover more ground, and communicate any findings. If we all stick to one path, we might miss something important." There were murmurs of agreement from the group, though some of the alien beings looked less than thrilled at the idea of splitting up. Still, they had little choice. The walls were already beginning to shift again, the maze constantly changing its configuration, as if alive. "We'll split into pairs," Thea said, taking charge with an air of authority. "That way, no one is left alone. If you find anything useful, an exit, a clue, signal the others." The sun in the simulated sky began to set, casting long shadows across the open plain where the maze had once stood. As Matthew, Thea, and the other participants gathered together, the silver-haired council member's voice echoed in their minds, congratulating them on completing the first trial. But the sense of victory was short-lived. Thea stood beside Matthew, her golden eyes narrowing as she watched the council's holographic image shimmer into view once more. The other participants shifted uneasily, clearly still shaken from the maze's illusory nature. Matthew could feel the tension rising, and something told him that the next trial wouldn't be as straightforward. "Congratulations on completing the first test," the council member said, his voice smooth and composed, though his eyes glinted with a calculating intensity. "You have proven your ability to think beyond the physical and rely on your mental prowess. But this was merely a warm-up." Matthew exchanged a glance with Thea. "Warm-up?" he muttered under his breath. If that was a warm-up, he dreaded what was coming next. The council member's smile didn't reach his eyes. The next phase will push you further, to challenge not just your mind, but your resolve and your moral compass. Be warned, from this point onward, failure may have consequences beyond just the experiment. There was a murmur among the participants. Some looked to each other, their expressions grim. The threat hung in the air, palpable, but before anyone could protest or ask questions, the council member waved his hand, and the ground beneath them rippled like water. Suddenly, they were transported to a new environment. Gone was the plain where the maze had stood. Instead, they found themselves in a massive arena-like structure, its walls lined with strange, glowing runes. The sky above was a swirling mass of clouds, lightning crackling across the heavens. In the center of the arena stood a platform, and on that platform rested what appeared to be a single glowing cube, pulsating with energy. It seemed to call out to them, beckoning them closer with its hypnotic light. The council member's voice echoed again. Your second trial is simple. The cube contains the key to unlocking the next stage of the experiment, but only one of you can retrieve it. The rest must decide how to proceed. Matthew's stomach dropped. He glanced at Thea, whose expression had gone stony. Around them, the other participants were already murmuring, their eyes fixed on the glowing cube. The cube represents knowledge, power, and advancement. The council member continued. The one who holds it will be granted great favor within the academy. But, in order to claim it, you must be willing to sacrifice something equally valuable. The arena was silent for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. Matthew's mind raced. The trial was designed to test their willingness to compete, to betray, to sacrifice for personal gain. It was a twisted game, one meant to fracture the group that had only just started working together. As the reality of the situation set in, the tension among the participants grew. Some of the larger and more imposing aliens began to step forward, their eyes gleaming with ambition. One of them, a massive creature with scaled skin and tusks jutting from its face, let out a low growl. This is a test of strength, it said, its voice like grinding stone. The weak will fall, and the strong will claim the prize. Thea's hand tightened into a fist, her body tensing as if preparing for a fight. But Matthew stepped forward, putting a hand on her arm. Wait, he said quietly. There's more to this than just grabbing the cube. She looked at him, her golden eyes questioning. What do you mean? Matthew thought back to the first trial, how the maze had been an illusion, a mental challenge disguised as a physical one. The council wasn't just testing brute strength, they were testing character, intelligence, and adaptability. And now, they were testing the group's ability to cooperate or crumble under pressure. This isn't about who's the strongest or who can get the cube first, Matthew said, loud enough for the others to hear. They want us to fight each other, but I don't think that's the right answer. The scaled creature snarled, its tusks gleaming in the flickering light. Then what is your answer, human? Talk will get you nowhere. Matthew didn't flinch, though his heart was racing. The first trial wasn't what it seemed. We were supposed to think our way out of the maze, not just follow the path they laid out for us. I think it's the same here. They want us to believe that only one of us can get the cube, but maybe that's just another illusion. Maybe we're supposed to work together. There was silence for a moment as the others processed his words. Some of the participants looked skeptical, while others seemed to be considering the possibility. Thea nodded, her expression softening. He's right. The council has already shown that they value more than just raw strength. If we let ourselves be divided now, we're playing into their hands. The obsidian-skinned creature from the first trial stepped forward, its deep voice cutting through the tension. If what the human says is true, then how do we proceed? How do we retrieve the cube without betraying each other? Matthew swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the group's gaze on him. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew they couldn't afford to turn on one another. We need to approach this together. No one rushes for the cube. We figure out a way to activate it as a group, or we don't do it at all. The scaled alien growled, clearly displeased, but it didn't make a move. The rest of the participants, perhaps unwilling to risk being the first to break the uneasy alliance, held back as well. As they gathered around the platform, the cube's light grew brighter, as if responding to their presence. Matthew studied it carefully, trying to make sense of the runes etched into the platform beneath it. There had to be a way to activate it that didn't involve one person claiming it for themselves. Thea crouched beside him, her fingers tracing the glowing symbols. These runes, they're a form of ancient code. If we can decipher them, we might be able to activate the cube without touching it. Matthew glanced at her, impressed. You know how to read this? Not exactly, she admitted, but I've seen similar symbols in the Academy's archives. It's a language of cooperation. Each symbol represents a different concept: unity, sacrifice, trust. Matthew's mind raced. That's it. The cube isn't meant for one person. It's meant to be activated by all of us together. The council wants to see if we can put aside our differences and work as a team. He turned to the others. We need to activate the symbols in the right order, but we'll all need to be involved. If we do it right, the cube should unlock, and we'll pass the trial without anyone having to sacrifice anything. There were murmurs of uncertainty, but no one moved to object. Slowly, the group began to surround the platform, each participant placing their hands on the glowing runes. Matthew felt a strange energy coursing through the air as they worked together, their collective will focused on the task at hand. As the symbols lit up one by one, the cube's glow intensified, and the air around them hummed with power. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire arena was vibrating with energy, and then, without warning, the cube split apart, revealing a brilliant burst of light. The council member's voice echoed once more, but this time, there was a hint of surprise in his tone. You have chosen cooperation over conflict. Unexpected, but commendable. The second trial is complete. The arena faded away, and they found themselves back in the central hall of the academy, the grand experiment still unfolding around them. But as Matthew looked at his fellow participants, he knew that something had changed. They had passed a test of character, not just skill. And that, more than anything, gave him hope for the trials to come. The council may have had hidden agendas, but Matthew was beginning to see through their games, and with Thea by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. The quiet hum of the academy hall surrounded them as the participants reappeared, still recovering from the disorienting shift back from the arena to the present moment. The second trial had ended successfully, though it had taken every ounce of cooperation, trust, and reasoning to decipher the council's intentions. Matthew stood alongside Thea, the pulse of the trials still racing through his mind. But even as they caught their breath, there was no time to rest. The council's holographic figure materialized once more, its expression as placid and inscrutable as ever. Well done, the council member intoned, his voice carrying an eerie calm. You have demonstrated that even under pressure, you can rise above competition to achieve unity. But you must not mistake this for the end. You are far from finished. The words sent a chill through the group. The second trial had already been a test of both their wits and their willingness to cooperate. Matthew could feel the mounting tension in the air as the group eyed one another, knowing that any alliances made were tenuous at best. The trials were far from over, and the council's true intentions remained clouded. Matthew exchanged a glance with Thea, who gave him a nod of silent affirmation. They had proven they could work together with the others, but there was a growing sense that the next trial would challenge them in a way none of the others had. What's next? Thea asked, her voice steady but laced with caution. She was as sharp as ever, her mind constantly working to anticipate the council's next move. The hologram's eyes seemed to glimmer with something unreadable. The third trial will test your loyalty and your ability to make decisions under duress, he explained. But more importantly, it will push you to confront your deepest motivations for being here. Are you here for knowledge? For power? For survival? These are the questions you must answer, for the next trial will reveal who you truly are. Matthew's heart sank slightly at the cryptic nature of the council's words. His gut told him this was not just a simple challenge. It was something far deeper, something designed to fracture their resolve. He could sense it in the shifting of the other participants, some of whom were already bristling with suspicion. Before anyone could voice their concerns or ask further questions, the ground beneath them shimmered once more, and the world around them began to fade. The group was pulled into yet another realm of illusion, or perhaps a different reality altogether. When the haze cleared, they stood in what appeared to be a vast and ancient chamber. The walls were made of smooth stone, carved with the same strange runes they had seen during the second trial. Massive pillars lined the room, each glowing with a faint, ethereal light. And in the center of the chamber stood a massive, looming door, made of dark metal that seemed to pulse with a quiet energy. The door was flanked by two statues, towering figures of beings neither human nor alien, their faces obscured by helmets. The atmosphere felt oppressive, as though the very air carried the weight of millennia-old secrets. "What is this place?" One of the participants. The door responded instantly. A bright light flared from the runes etched into the surface, illuminating the entire room in a harsh, blinding glow. The silver-skinned alien gasped, their bodies stiffening as the light surrounded them. For a moment, it seemed as though the light was drawing something out of them, something intangible but deeply personal. Then, with a final pulse, the light dimmed, and the aliens staggered back, their face pale, their eyes wide with shock. "It's gone," they whispered, their voice trembling. "A part of me. It's gone." Matthew's heart raced. Whatever the council had taken, it was something irreplaceable, something that had left the alien hollow diminished. The trial was not just a test of will, it was a test of what they were willing to lose. Thea stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. "We have no choice," she said quietly to Matthew. "If we don't do this, we fail, but we need to be careful about what we're willing to give." Matthew nodded, though his mind was spinning. What could he offer? What could any of them offer? The council had made it clear that this trial was about sacrifice, but what they hadn't revealed was the cost. And as the other participants began to approach the door, one by one, each offering their own sacrifice, the chamber filled with an eerie, oppressive silence. Matthew's turn was approaching, and as he stood before the door, he could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. What would he be forced to give up? His memories, his loyalty, his very humanity? The council's motives were becoming clearer by the minute. They weren't just testing the group's abilities, they were manipulating them, shaping them, bending them to their will. And with every sacrifice made, the group was being drawn deeper into the council's grand design. As Matthew reached out to touch the door, he could feel the cold metal beneath his fingers, the hum of energy pulsing through his hand. The vault was close to being unlocked, but the true cost of opening it was still unknown.